find the middle ground here, because it's really this fine line between not being too lazy or sloppy and being overly obsessive. So let's dive into some practical solutions and things you can do. This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go. Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band Podcast. I am your host, Benedictine, and I'm here with my friend and co-host, Malcolm Owen-Flood. How are you, Malcolm?
Hello. I'm good, man. It is still sunny over here in Canada. I hear it was hailing over in Germany, so this is nice.
Yeah, I hope it's just a short storm kind of thing and we'll be over soon, because it was amazing with the whole last 2 weeks or so were amazing.
Yeah. I'm sure it's not going to be, that'd be quite the twist in 2020 if Germany just descends into winter in the middle of August.
I wouldn't be surprised at this point, oh man. But yeah, so you had some trekking sessions. We were talking about that before.
Yep. It's been a pretty busy little while. I've just had a band in all week. Been tracking away, working at a couple different studios. One was awesome. One was a pain in the ass, but the band was great. That's the most important part. Yeah. But it was a lot to manage. 5 days back to back, long days really adds up, and you really have to be organized and you have to have a strategy and a plan if you want things to not descend into chaos and confusion, essentially.
Oh yeah, totally. You have to, and that also applies to when you're working on your own, when you recording your own music, not only when you're renting out studios or do like Malcolm, travel between different studios, you gotta make sure the whole process goes smoothly and you focus on the right things and you use your time, spend your time wisely on the things that really matter. So part of that is also knowing when something is good enough or not good enough yet, and how to communicate with your band members and essentially your friends in most cases, which is also important. So it's not only about the record, it's about relationships. And that's why, because this is such an important topic and people are having issues with that a lot, that's why we do this episode, and it's about the pitfalls of being overly obsessive while tracking, and how being too hard on yourself and your band members can negatively affect performances and relationships. Because that's a real thing. You do not only risk to get a subpar product in the end, but also you risk your relationships with your friends if you're not careful here, right?
Yeah, definitely. If people are unsure if they've experienced this yet, you probably could look for it in other situations of being in a band, like when you're writing together. Normally when a band starts, they have this writing spree that just seems unstoppable, and they just pump out song after song after song without any hiccups. But eventually, a song's tough to write. and somebody might show up with a bad attitude, and then you're trying to write a song, and there's just no ideas are coming, and everybody's kind of just everybody's hit a wall. And if you're not careful in the studio, if you get too obsessive and too caught up on little details that don't actually matter, that's exactly what can happen here as well. So, instead of tracking the guitar part, you're just obsessing over the performance of this one section over and over and over. And, all of a sudden you've been playing it, shooting out different guitars and different amps and whatever for 4 hours and got nothing done. And nobody has any ears anymore. Nobody has the energy to record it, even if you wanted to now. And that time is gone. And not only is that time gone, but the player's enthusiasm is also gone, which is the worst part.
Absolutely. Because you have to remember that the final result, the outcome of everything you do is depends on everybody being stoked, and then depends on the performances, it depends on how excited you are while you play. You can hear that stuff in the end. And if the energy is not there, the vibe is not there, people are not excited, it shows. And it's going to be a different end result. And in most cases, we shouldn't forget that this should be fun. In most cases, the people in your band are your friends. You're doing this because it's fun. It's not just a job. Like for many of us, it's not even a job at all. But like even if it is your income or side income, it's still something that should be fun, right? It's art, and it should be fun for the people to listen that listen to it. And that will only work if you have fun while you're creating it. So you should not only enjoy the end results and try to achieve your goals, but also enjoy the process, right? Like it's like playing a game. If you play a game with someone you like, it's not necessarily just about winning. You just want to play the game. And it's the same here. You want to go to the studio with your friends, make music, enjoy the process. And that's important to remember here, because we always talk about goals and how to do things right and about results. But it's not only about the results. And I've seen this in a couple of instances with people that I'm working with, where, without saying any names, but many people just get stuck and just don't know when things are good enough, how long things should take, how to properly communicate, how to be on the same page with everyone in the band. And like some people in the band still enjoy the process and like obsessing over every detail, while others are kind of losing interest and are not excited anymore. So that's a real problem that happens often. And just some projects just take forever, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I do want to say that this doesn't mean that it's meant to be easy either.
No.
Like, so it's a fine line between, it's still going to be hard and challenging to get these takes to the level you want, but you do have to develop the skill and make sure you're in the right mindset to realize when it is good enough and realize when it's as good as it's going to get as well. And not just beat the dead horse, as the saying goes. You have to, we talk about in this podcast a lot about committing sounds on the way in, and just being like, this is the sound I want. Why wouldn't I just commit it? I don't need to like not do that because that's what I read on the internet. No, you can just commit it and know that this is exactly what you wanted it to be. And that is the same with performances. I think it's pretty common for engineers starting out to just record take after take after take after take, just because they just like want to have their bases covered and be like, oh God, if that one's not good enough, at least one of these 100 takes will be. And that's a bad way to go about it. You're just kind of wearing the performer out in a big way. So if they get it right on the first try, I mean, actually, if they get it right on the first try, I normally do get them to do it a second time just in case they can do it better.
Yeah.
It's like, well, maybe that was their bad take, but it sounded awesome to me. But if, 3 takes in and I know that first one was killer, we're going to stop it there. We're not going to do more just for the hell of it. So you have to be really aware of what's going on.
Absolutely. So to give this episode some structure, I'll just go quickly over like the problem, like some of the problems and some of the things that actually happen often that I've seen in people's projects, and then we'll talk about what consequences it can have on like for your relationships and for the performances, the results you're getting, and we're going to talk about some solutions, of course, and tips you can use to avoid that problem. So what happens often is that, as I said, projects take forever. As Malcolm said, like it feels like you don't know when it's good enough, and it feels like someone is always complaining and they make you do it over and over and over again, and you're not really sure why. Then sometimes people just have to wait while the tech person in the band constantly messes with details and things that don't seem to matter, or they're not sure what they're doing, or they are not quick enough with the DAW, so they're constantly messing around, and the other people have to wait. I've also seen that some band members may have to drive a long way to the practice space or the studio and feel like they are wasting time, and they want things to go quicker and more efficient. And they want to drive there 100 times until the EP is finished, right? So those are some of the things that happen if it takes too long and if you're overly obsessive and focus on things that are not really so important or as important as you think. So let's start with the personal consequences, that what consequences it can have for your relationships and for your band.
Right.
What are some things that you've seen happen in those sessions, Malcolm?
I mean, a really common and pretty bad one, I think, is just that the person's self-esteem gets pretty destroyed by having to play it over and over again. They start to like doubt themselves and think that they're not good enough. And that they can't get the take how it's meant to sound, even if they can't tell what you're looking for. So, and we are making an assumption through this episode, I think, that whoever is running the DAW is probably the most focused on this. Like that's just generally how it goes. Whoever is running the computer is the one that's just like obsessing over the details. That might not be true, but usually it is. So you're running the DAW and then somebody else is playing the guitar part that's safer right now. And if you get them to play that intro like 80 times in a row, eventually they're going to start to think they suck and start to get worse in that session, but also just for future sessions. And they're going to want to like not show up anymore and not want to do this. You know, if you defeat them too much, they'll actually think they can't even do it at all. And then you've kind of lost them at that point. So confidence, I think, is a big cost of this if you're not careful.
Totally. That's super common. And I think it's still important to push people and to get the best takes out of them. So that's also not, like Malcolm is not saying, again, that it should be easy or that you should always use the first 3 takes or whatever. That's not the case, but in case you need more takes or it's really not there yet, there are ways to maybe say it differently or like, it's often the like how you say it more than what you say. So we get into that later when you talk about solutions and tips. But in general, like the self-esteem, confidence thing is a big one, definitely. And I also think like a consequence for relationships could be, it's like when you've spent so much time together working on something, even if you like made it through this process, and even if the result turned out great and everyone likes it, it can be that you are just burnt out after it, and it can like really, it can cause the band to just slow down, and like you will need recovery time, and you will not be as excited to promote it and to book shows because you need a break from all that stress that you had recording those songs. So even if you make it through the process and you're still friends, it could harm the band and the overall vibe in the band. And like once the project's done, everybody's like, burnt out, and that's also dangerous. And I've seen people like bands break up after a big project where it was just so exhausting and they couldn't get themselves back up again afterwards. So
yep, and or they just never release it because they just don't feel good about it anymore. Unfortunately, you have to love this thing that you're making, so you can't kind of risk jeopardizing that. And it is fairly common for people to be like, because I mean, it's part of it. You're going to play the song a lot of times and hear it so many times that they're like, "Oh God, I need a break from this song." But you don't want them to hate it. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
So it has to be a positive, fun experience, and it is a tricky thing to do. And unfortunately, as a new kind of producer, whoever's sitting in the chair recording their own band, it's kind of stacked against you because you're learning how to use a DAW, you're learning how to engineer on the go, you're learning how to manage your band members in a new way, because you're now kind of by default not treating them as necessarily an equal. You're kind of telling them what to do because you're trying to like capture the performance as the engineer and producer. And that's a total dynamic shift. Some people don't like being told what to do, so you have to really learn how to do it in a way that satisfies their little quirks and egos and stuff like that, So yeah, I mean, we are going to talk about more tips and stuff later in the episode here, but the biggest thing I think is just positive attitude going into it and making sure that the performer is also in a positive space.
Totally. Let's talk about consequences for like performances and the results, actually. So aside from the personal consequences, your product, the sound of your record will, or like the arrangements of the songs or whatever you're working on, will probably suffer if you are overly obsessive. And that sounds counterintuitive because you think if you're like really a perfectionist and you get all the details right, you might think it will turn out to be a better record, but the opposite could be the case. And here's why. Number one, if people are not stoked, they don't play as well. Simple as that. If you don't like it, you just not perform as well. It will not sound as exciting, and people will notice. So that's the first one. What else is there that you could think of?
I'm kind of thinking of the law of diminishing returns, where this picture a drummer. They start out stoked and fresh, and strong and healthy and awake. And then after like hours and hours of playing the same song, they're hardly hitting the drum because they're so tired. They're not patient enough to play in time, so they're trying to like rush and play faster than they should be, or they're just too tired and they're playing sluggish and they just can't really keep up with the click or the scratch tracks. I mean, all of those things. Or also, you know, now your drum heads are totally beat to hell. Your sticks are broken, you know. Everything's gone wrong. Cymbals are broken. Like the longer you go, all of these things are going to start suffering. And that's just a fact, you know, and that's true with every instrument. Guitar strings are going to get dead. Bass strings are going to get dead. The vocalist vocal cords are going to get worn out. So you actually have this time limit where the longer you go, the worse things get, always.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Absolutely. Like I've seen, like it can go in all sorts of directions. Like even if people are not mad at you, if you're the person like who's very hard on them, even if they're not getting mad at you, some people just get mad or angry at themselves for not being able to pull it off. And I've seen drummers throw sticks across the room and like being really angry and mad at what that leads to is they can't concentrate anymore. Like they're not there anymore. Really, they're not focusing and they're not giving 100%. It can go in all sorts of directions, but in all cases, the end result will probably suffer.
Definitely.
Yeah. And it could also cost you more money, even if you're on your own studio, because as Malcolm said, you might need an extra set of drum skins or something if it takes longer, or you might need more strings or sticks or whatever. Like that's also something to consider.
Definitely, yeah, and like with the vocalist, especially if you blow out their vocal cords by just running them too long, now you need weeks at least, you know, before you can get them back in. So. Like there's the physical sonic qualities that will get lost, but what you're talking about their like energy and ability to play well. I mean, I think everybody who's a musician has kind of gotten into like a flow zone where they're just killing it. Like especially at concerts, you know, you have like these parts of concerts where you're just so in the zone and you're nailing everything. Obviously, you're going to have a better recording if your musicians are in that space when they're recording rather than the like over analytical focusing too hard and tripping over themselves kind of mindset, right? Or too tired to even be, you know, like okay, I'm jumping all over the place.
Yeah,
but
totally fine.
This is something that happens a lot where you change something on somebody. So the drummer comes in and you tell them to go to the ride instead of the hi-hat for the chorus, and then you try and punch it in and they just keep going to the hi-hat. They just can't do it. Like, you know, they're caught up on the other way around. And this could be any instrument, any circumstance. You just change something and they just cannot get their body to listen. That's the kind of thing that you got to watch out for, because that ability to adjust is what makes records be able to become these magical moments where you can experiment and adjust on the fly and discover magic. And if your drummer is too tired and unable to focus, or any player, not just drummers, I'm picking on drummers for some reason right now, is too unable to adjust and move with like the inspiration that's like the creativity that's flowing through the room, then you're kind of like losing out on the ability to capitalize on these cool ideas as they come. And that's when I'm like bummed out. Like, I know this song could be so much better if we could just get them to pull it off, but they just don't have it in them. And that sucks.
Oh yeah, totally. Such a big one. Or they are not open to it anymore. Like they don't want to hear any new suggestions or ideas. They are just like fed up. Like they don't want to do anything. And whereas when they are still fresh and excited and see that they're making progress and that you move on and that you're creating something together and that it's fun, they will be much more likely to be open, listen to ideas and try to make it work. And yeah, it's totally.
Yeah. Part of a good producer is being able to gauge their ability to do stuff like that. There's definitely been points where I've looked at the clock and thought about the idea I've got for the bridge and just been like, it won't happen. We're just going to not do that. It's going to be the way they wrote it. And it's just, they can't afford another day and they won't pull it off tonight. So like, that's the hard call.
Oh yeah.
But it had to be made, you know?
Oh yeah, totally. That's part of being a producer, as you said, right? So, Yeah, but that's also one of the advantages. We've said that in episodes, in early episodes, that if you don't have to pay for studio time, you at least don't have that problem. So we're just in this episode we're constantly saying that it should be quick and shouldn't take too long. But if you need another day, and that can of course happen, and it's like some things just need a little more time, you can do it in a relaxed way. You don't need to worry about money. You can keep like the vibe up. You can say, okay, let's finish early today and do another session tomorrow. It won't cost us anything, you know. You are more free. You don't have to power through a crazy long day just to try and make it work. That's one of the advantages that you have. And sometimes just like taking a break and like spreading it out to a different day can make a difference. But we'll talk about that in the solutions again, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, the whole thing about it's what I said, that it's important to feel like you're making progress. We're going to do a whole other episode on that, so it's not something we're going to talk in depth about now, but that's just something to keep in mind, that you always want to move on. You always want to make everyone feel like you're creating something together, like, that it actually comes together, and you want to get people stoked to play and contribute to it. And yeah, that, because if that doesn't happen, people seem like they have the feeling like they're just wasting their time because they don't see really any progress. They stop believing in the whole project eventually, and so yeah, move on, get things done, keep everyone excited. Yeah, and that's how you that's important to get a great result as well as when we're talking about consequences for performances and results.
Yes.
So we've talked about one thing in a couple of episodes, and that is editing. What is editing to do with all this, Malcolm?
Right. Well, sometimes you're better served by fixing the performance in question in the DAW rather than trying to get them to play it over and over again. Sometimes it's way quicker, and and sometimes it's just not possible for them to play it the way you want to hear it. So if you can just make that happen real quick, click, 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 it's done. That's totally worth it in my mind. You know, you're not fatiguing them. You're not burning out their instrument or their physical ability, and you're moving on, which you were just talking about. Momentum is so huge in these sessions that that'll keep a tired person going, is if they think they're winning.
Oh yeah.
You know? So like, even if you're recording vocals and you get caught up on the first line, which actually happens quite a bit, the first line's always the hardest. Just move on, you know, do it like 4 times or whatever, and they're still not getting it. Just be like, all right, that sounded great. Let's move on to the next one, and just keep going or whatever. And then you know that you're going to come back to that first one, but you don't have to tell them that right then. You know, you can just be like, that's great. We're moving on. They think they've won it. They're like, sweet. Okay, we're on to the next one. They're making progress. And then you burn through the song. They start getting more confident and more confident like that. And then you just, you know, they're at peak confidence. You jump back to the start of the song. They nail it right away. So you can do that with all instruments. Just momentum. Keep them thinking that they're winning, and they will win.
Absolutely.
But
yeah.
What was your question? I went off topic there, I'm sure.
Editing. Yeah.
Yeah, I went way off. Yeah, so editing, though, is another thing that you can do to keep them winning. And if they just can't get that, chances are you can probably nudge it the extra 10% it needs with editing and just get that done. And then, that's like we said, get it onto the next part.
Yeah. Totally. But I want to say a couple of things to that, because it's a hot topic in some way, and also it's there. Yeah, we need to talk about it a little bit. So what we mean here is mainly you can rely on editing to save a great take. So there's nothing wrong with that. So if someone does a really great performance, a really great job singing or drumming or whatever, but it's just not technically perfect, you might still want to keep that take because it's the most musical one, the most exciting one. And instead of trying to get that same energy and the perfection, you can just keep the take, the energy, and make it more perfect in editing. And there's nothing wrong with that. The other way around is you can, as Malcolm said, make just a performance that they can't pull off. You can make that better, or you can save that. But I would be careful with that, because that can go off in the other direction. That can, we're not here to tell you that you can just be lazy and do a sloppy performance and then just fix it afterwards. That's not the right mindset. It's just, you always have to think what's what's the better solution for the moment? Is it better to do another 5 takes? Is it realistic to get it in those 5 or 10 takes or whatever max you want to do? If it's not realistic, you will probably rather move on now and just edit it. And if you think you can get it out of them within a couple of takes, then it's worth trying. You always have to, it's a fine line and you always have to make that decision. So yeah, it's just, don't be lazy, but consider editing, and also know that there's nothing wrong with it if you use it. Like the end result and the fun you have while you're making it is all that matters. So yeah, before you get frustrated and end up with a less than ideal result, I would just edit it.
Yeah. Now, there's kind of an easy way to know if it's not good enough. And that is if it takes longer to edit it into shape than it would just to record it again and get it right that way, then you should have just recorded it again. It should be a very quick thing. And if a guitarist hates playing it again, they're definitely going to hate waiting for you to try and edit it.
Oh, yeah. And that's also another thing that we need to say here. You need to know how good you are at editing, or if you have someone that you outsource it to that you trust, because you can't always do it on the fly. Sometimes you just have to be confident enough that you can actually fix it.
Yep.
And you got to be honest with yourself, because if you say we can fix it, but then you can't, you have a problem, right? So, and also doing it on the fly is great if you're not wasting anyone's time. But if you are like not as quick in the DAW, or like not as experienced, or if you have to try things a lot, then I would not do it on the fly, because that again kills the vibe. That again makes everyone wait. And so I would just think about if you think you can fix it, and then make that decision. And if it's just a little thing, do it on the fly, but don't have the whole band waiting for you trying to fix something. If you do that after every take, it will go on forever, and no one will be excited to play anymore.
Yes.
So yeah. What do you in those cases? I mean, you can edit obviously, and you are fast in the DAW. Do you still what do you do? Do you edit a lot on the fly?
I do, yeah. I think that's just because I'm fast enough at it. I really love knowing that I'm never going to have to think about that part again before we move on.
Yeah.
That's not to say that there isn't times where I do. Like, it's all that it comes down to experience of knowing, okay, how much time is left on the clock, how much time is left in this player, and how close is this performance. So if I can just nudge it in by the time they're getting, I'm like, tune, and then I'm editing it as they're tuning. And if I can get it done before they're ready to hit that next part, then that's kind of how I'll go about it. And usually that works for me.
Okay, yeah, sure. But the main reason is that you're fast and you know what you're doing. And I've seen it with a lot of people who are not like that, and they try to edit it on the fly, but they're not really sure what they're doing. And then it can be a problem.
But yeah, like you said, you just have to know, you have to be absolutely positive that it will work. And that's part of the reason I guess I edit on the fly often enough, is that I just need to know that it's done. So if that's how you think you would like to do things, you have to practice and put in time to get fast. That's like a requirement. You can't expect people to wait for you.
Yeah. And often this is also something that helps you know if a take is good enough or not, because if it's so far off that you, let's say you have practiced and you can do basic editing, you can do basic time stretching, slip editing, basic tuning, stuff that's not too crazy. If you can do that and you're not sure if you can fix a part, if it's so far off that you're not sure you can do it, it's probably not good enough yet. Mm-hmm. Totally depends, again, if you can get the take out of the player that you want, but sometimes that's just an indicator that it's not good enough yet. And if it's just something where you say, okay, that's a little late or a little early, it's not perfect, but we can easily fix that, then you can just move on, because that stuff like that can be fixed. Or if it's just a little flat or a little sharp, it's no problem fixing those things if you know what you're doing. So that also helps you decide if a take is good enough or not. And you should always focus more on the energy, the performance, than on those technical things. That's also something you just need to practice. You just need to forget about if it's a little late or early sometimes. You just need to listen for other things, the character and the voice, the attack of the pick attack, or the attack of the drums, or the overall vibe and stuff like that is more important often than if it's perfectly in time or a little flat or something. So
There's probably a keyboard shortcut in every DAW that's for something called the nudge key. At least that's what it's called in Pro Tools. And that just nudges a clip left or right in the timeline. And you can set that to be whatever amount of samples you want. And I would encourage everyone to just learn that, because enough of the editing that you'll need to do on the fly is just grabbing the entire clip they recorded and nudging it a little left or right. Just taking the whole thing. It's like hardly even editing at that point. You're just taking what they did and moving the entire thing a little bit one way. And that'll normally get you close enough to be able to move on, I think. Because I want to be able to listen back to the whole thing at the end. By the time they get to the end of the song, I want to be like, okay, let's listen to it, check it out, and make sure we're done. And we can listen through without being like, oh, that was weird. If we have to stop every time, that sucks. So that is like a really quick, actionable little editing trick you can learn and get quick at on the fly, and just nudge as you go without slowing down the session at all.
Yeah.
And that's generally, if you can't get it to sound pretty well right with that, then I think it's a retake.
Yeah, totally. And before we move on to like tips and solutions, it's again important to say here that editing, there's nothing wrong with it, and it doesn't kill like the soul or whatever of the song, and it doesn't ruin like the magic. It's the opposite is the case. What ruins it is overly obsessing and having players in the studio or in the practice space that don't want to play, that are not excited. That is what kills the vibe and what kills the emotion and energy of a song. Editing used in the way that we just described it just helps that, because it's a faster process, it's more fun, you get more exciting takes, you focus on what really matters, what really connects with the listener, and it just helps the song. It doesn't kill anything, because people always, when they hear editing, I know when we're going to release this episode, somebody will email me and tell me that editing is wrong and the devil and kills music, so that's not the case, right? That's no matter what someone on some YouTube video tells you, that's not the case.
On their heavily edited YouTube video.
Yeah, exactly. Because otherwise it would be so exhausting to watch. That's why they edit it, and it's the same with music, but that's a whole other topic. We should mention, I think, that over editing is just as dangerous. Yeah, of course.
And kind of the same topic, because editing is the engineer's version of over obsession about a take.
Oh yeah, totally.
they just like, it's their instrument all of a sudden. Learning all their hotkeys and chopping and stretching and stuff, that becomes their little instrument of licks, and they just want to touch every little like transient on there, and you don't need to usually. So learn that, there's a line between, okay, I can quickly make this better, or I can obsess on it for half an hour here and then really piss off the guy waiting to play. Exactly.
Especially if you do it in front of people, like, when there's someone waiting for it. And also like pay attention when you like that. I can understand that, because I'm like, of course I'm a nerd and I like computers and tech stuff and working in the DAW because that's my job. But you have to read like body language and like the faces of the people around you, and you might get excited and you might be able to edit for an hour without like getting exhausted. But if everyone else around you is waiting and gets annoyed, you just need to be aware of that and just communicate with people and watch how they react to that, and have a conversation before you just go off and do it.
Yeah.
That leads us to tips, solutions, what you can actually do to find the middle ground here, because it's really this fine line between not being too lazy or sloppy and being overly obsessive. So let's dive into some practical solutions and things you can do.
All right. Number 1, take breaks. Counterintuitive. Every band always wants to just hustle and work super long days without any breaks in the middle, and that's just such a terrible idea for so many reasons. Pretty much every reason we've talked about here. Fatigue, just like mindset and focus, all of those things suffer without rest. Your ears even, a big part of engineers obsessing over things is their ear getting like hypersensitive to things, so maybe you decide that you don't like the way the pick is scraping, and you just like spend way too long messing around with stuff trying to fix that. And then if you'd just taken like a half-hour break or whatever and come back and listen to it, you'd probably be like, oh, that sounds good. Like it's just stood out to you for some reason. And that really happens. You just hone in on things that don't matter and aren't even necessarily bad. You just hear them for some reason. And yeah, breaks are really the only way I know how to defeat that. I would actually say that you should take a break every hour. Like a 10-minute break every hour is like a good rule of thumb, something that I am absolutely just atrocious at following. But when I do, it's hugely beneficial.
Absolutely agreed. I need to learn that myself, and I'm getting better at it. But what I've found lately is that you might think taking breaks frequently is a waste of time, but actually the opposite is the case. In most cases, when I really force myself to take breaks, I'll get it done earlier than when I try to just burn through it, because I make mistakes, I go back to things, I doubt myself. And when I take breaks, that doesn't happen as much. I'm more focused, quicker. And so in the end, you might even be faster when you take breaks. So yeah, just try that. It's true.
And also important to remember that yourself and your bandmates also need to have food. They require food to live and perform. And that's another one. For some reason, bands show up to the studio and they think that they should skip lunch to just keep working. I'm like, okay, well, you're going to be just useless by the end of the day.
Oh, totally. That and water. Like water. I'm that too. Like I forget that I need to drink. It's like, I don't know why that is. I need to force myself to drink enough. But when I don't do it, I'm just so like spent after a while. Like I can't think clearly. I get headaches. I like drinking enough water is so important, especially if you do like mentally exhausting work. So yeah, totally. Yeah, lunch and
water,
food and water. Yeah,
not just coffee, not just beer.
Yeah, exactly. Then the next one here is discuss the goal before you start tracking. That's important before you start the whole project, actually, because what I've seen sometimes is that people kind of mix up the steps on the way to the final product. So they will write a song, they will work on the arrangement, they will start tracking maybe, then they will rehearse again, they might change something, they get feedback, then they track again, and it gets all mixed up, and you're not really like making progress, you're not really know what you're working towards, you don't have a final vision there, or like the final version of the pre-production before you start tracking. You constantly have to discuss things during the tracking process, so it's recommended and much easier to batch the single steps like of the process and to start with a common goal and something you all work towards. So discuss what you're going for, discuss what the record will be like, why it should be that way, who's the audience, what you're trying to accomplish, all those things. Then work on the songs, work on the arrangements, get feedback on that part of the process, then do the pre-production, get feedback here, record like the demos, record a more refined demo until you have basically the final thing as in demo form, like the final pre-production. And then when there's basically nothing more to discuss, when everyone knows the goal, everyone knows the direction you're going in, everyone knows what the song's going to be like, you just have to document it or like capture it and give your best and do the best takes. Then you start tracking. And that just makes you feel like you're making progress. It's a quick way to work because you're focusing on one thing at a time and not constantly going back and forth. And and everybody is like on the same page and works towards the same goal. And everybody knows how good it should be, how tight it should be. Everyone knows that they should practice, or if they're just not good enough yet, you can track later and everyone has the chance to get better and practice or improve their setup or whatever. So that eliminates the need to torture people during recording. Like if you practice before, like if you're just prepared, that doesn't even come up. So don't mix those steps up too much and just be on the same page when you start tracking. I think that's super important.
Yeah. Communication is just like the big category there. And I liked all of those points you made because when I wrote that into our little show notes here, I was just thinking like they're literally sitting in the chair ready to play, and then you have a discussion about what you're about to do. But what you just said is awesome. All of that stuff leading up to there will go such a long way. And, you want them to know why they're in the chair before they get there.
Totally. That's why we have a whole episode on the importance of pre-production and preparing and stuff. And that's why we talk so much about the setup and all the stuff before you record, because that all eliminates much of the issues we're talking about in this episode. actually.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. But on the topic of having that conversation when they're in the chair, guitar in lap, ready to perform, that is a good spot to kind of prepare them for what is going to come. And I can be pretty grueling on the musicians who come to work with me. I can be pretty tough on them. So anytime I remember to give them a heads up for like how like much I'm going to kick their ass, tends to go well. It's like they're like, number one, they don't believe me, but then they do believe me as soon as I start doing it. So like that helps. Otherwise, they think it's going to be easy, and all of a sudden they're just like sweating, like literally sweating, and stressed out. And they're like, "Why is this guy like telling me to do it over?" And like, "Oh my god, this is so hard." Yeah. And like, I thought I was just going to play the song once, like start to finish. So like, sit them down. Like for example, Benny, let's pretend you're the guitarist. And we're about to punch you in to start recording the song. I might be like, all right, so just so you know, I'm going to be really on your case about tuning. Like in between every take, I'll probably get you to tune. But because we're doubling, you're just going to tune after you get a left and a right down. Sit up straight. Hold your pick. Yep, that's the right pick. We already shot out picks, so that's great. Always use that pick. Don't change picks on me. And how this is going to go is I'm going to record you. We're just going to play just the intro. And then if you get it, I'm going to immediately record you again. If we don't, I'm going to get you to tune and we'll record it again. And we're just going to do that over and over again until I tell you that we've got it. And I might, expand on that a little bit and just be like, I'll offer tips if things like if we need to adjust and stuff like that. But you just need to focus on nailing this one part. And then we hit play, and then I start kicking their ass because I'm moving quick.
Yeah.
I think part of it for me is just like getting them in gear to realize how quick and fast paced I'm going to want it to be going. It's going to be like, all right, play again kind of thing. And if they're not ready for that, it's just like, oh, like I thought I was going to sip coffee between every take.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I've seen you in a bathrobe in the early mornings too often to be afraid of you. So that doesn't work anymore with me, I guess. But if you like everyone else, you're still an authority too. So I think
I'll never be producing your band.
No, but you're totally right. The way that you said it alone immediately, like even now, immediately makes me pay attention and listen, and I just know what we're about to do. And it's not, and I don't perceive that in a negative way at all. It's just it's a clear way of saying how things will go, what we do next, why we do it, and it kind of gets me in the right mindset to perform. I know what to expect. I won't be surprised. If I don't like any of it, I can just have a conversation and ask you about it, or if we can do it differently or whatever. Yep. But it's just
how, what, and why.
Yeah. So like the communication is so big, and especially again if you're working with your friends, you should just be open and talk about things, and and nobody should ever be surprised and take things like in a negative way. So totally, that helps a lot. Yeah. The other way around is like, or another way of doing it, or another thing that helps is you just can be positive and make like compliments and reassure people rather than just criticize them and be like hard on them. So what Malcolm just did was he was not negative, or he was not being hard on me. He just made clear instructions. There's no questions left. Like, I just know what to do. I'm focused. I'm ready. I want to pull it off. And then when I pull it off, I'm sure Malcolm will like let me know that I pulled it off and that it's great. And he will reassure me. He will like give me a confidence boost, and I will be even more excited to move on and do the next thing. And that just goes such a long way. So it's not about being mean to people, not at all. It's about being clear when you need to be clear. And it's about being positive and like, just making sure people keep their confidence and self-esteem.
Yeah, this is my biggest pet peeve in the world right now, I think. So if you go back to, we did an episode on vocals.
Episode number 11, 5 Essential Steps to a Pro Vocal Recording.
Yes, that was a great episode. You should listen to that if you haven't. But we talk about a little bit about getting rid of everybody that's not meant to be there for that part. So kicking out the band and just having the vocalist in there potentially and yourself. The less people, the better. And the reason, the big reason right now that I'm thinking about is that other people might not know how to give feedback as well as you, and not understand that compliments and reassurance go a lot further than criticism. And especially with vocalists and stuff. So I like to have a manual talkback button of way of communicating with the singer, especially, so that when somebody else is in the room and they say, "Oh, you were flat on that, like whatever note," they don't hear that because I wasn't holding talkback, because they don't need to hear that. They don't even need to know that they didn't get it. They just might need to do it again, like they know what the note is. So 99% of the feedback that people have for singers especially is not important to be heard. Like, it is a bad idea for them to hear, in my opinion. The feedback they need is, could you push a little harder on that word? It's like tone kind of thing. They're trying to hit the note. They don't need to know that they didn't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So almost all criticism is better unsaid.
Yes.
Because it's not actually relevant. They're trying to do it right. So you telling them they didn't get it is not going to help them do it. They need to know about stuff that they're not trying to do, or they don't know they need to do. And you might be better served by just complimenting them.
Yes.
Being like, you literally look awesome right now. And they're like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
And then they sing a little more confidently. Oh. Dang, we got it.
Totally. And also the stuff that you let them hear, it makes a difference how you the words you use make a difference. Like, it's a total difference between saying, that was too early, do it again, and saying, if you could do it a little later, if you could come in a little later, that would be awesome. It's like making it sound positive and letting them know that they almost got it. It's just a little more in that direction is much better than constantly pointing out what's negative or what was wrong. So that also helps a lot. You can say the same thing often in two different ways. So you should be careful with your words and the impact they have. So
yeah, that's very wise. Yeah. It's not uncommon for me to be comping something and just be like, oh, that was awesome. We almost have it. I just need one little bit. Just hit it one more time for me. I bet we'll get it. And you don't even, I almost don't want them to know which part I'm trying to get, because I think they'll over focus on it, and just kind of get too hyper focused. And it's just you're doing great. Hit it again. Yeah, we got this kind of thing.
Also, doing the feedback thing too early can ruin the vibe. Or obsessing, to stay on topic of this episode, obsessing about things too early can be dangerous. So because especially vocalists just need to get comfortable. They need to warm up a little bit, and when they do the first take, and immediately after the first take, the whole band goes off and tells them what is wrong. That's the best way to ruin the whole session. Just give them a couple of takes, let them hear the song before you say anything. Basically, it could be that the first take is great, but just let them sing for some time before you even start saying something. Don't go in too early. That's also something I see a lot when bandmates immediately go off on the singer, right after they started. And
this is especially true of vocals, but it's definitely true of all instruments. If the drummer is just rushing to fill into the first chorus, give them a couple tries. They're nervous. They're just under the microscope. There's a bunch of people literally looking at them through a window. Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah.
and same with guitarists. If they're playing a chord and there's bending one of the strings a little out of tune, it might have just been a weird take. Yeah. I wouldn't jump on it right away.
Yeah. Also, be on time. When you are in the session, as a bandmate, watching someone perform, if you want to be there, be on time and don't come in an hour late, miss everything that's happened in the first hour, and then say what you want to say to what you're hearing. That's also a common thing, where people would come in the middle of the session. They don't know what was going on. They don't know where we're at. They hear the first take and they immediately start criticizing. That's also a really bad idea. So be there from the beginning, or if you come later, just be quiet. And totally. Okay. The next thing, be quick. The more you're out of the way, the better. That's again about the editing thing, I think, a lot, and about the handling the DAW and stuff, right?
Yeah. Just if it takes you too long to do really any step in the process, it slows down the session. There can't be a flow if they're always waiting for the computer, aka you. The computer's fast, it's you. So just learn your DAW, get good at it. I literally practiced my DAW skills, like just in empty sessions and stuff like that. Learn hotkeys. It's like an instrument. If you treat it like an instrument, you'll do fine.
Yeah, totally.
There's always going to be something that comes up though, so don't get too stressed out about it.
Yeah, that's basically everything that needs to be said. Practice it, be fast, be invisible, focus on like the performance, be a good communicator, be present, like look people
Right.
in the face, watch how they react, listen to what they say. Don't just be in your screen all the time, just be in the room with them and do the computer stuff like without them even noticing. That would be ideal. Just be a part of the team and operate the computer like as just in a natural way.
Yeah. The speed of your DAW skill should be at conversational pace, hopefully. So you can be describing what you want them to do and then punch them in right as you tell them to.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. But we should also mention that also kind of extends into the hardware part of engineering side of things. You also need to be quick enough with getting tones and gear set up, running cables, plugging in stuff, getting levels, headphones, monitoring. That stuff can also eat up a lot of time. I was in a studio just last week where the routing was undesirable at best, I'll say. And it took a long time to get anything going, and it definitely was not ideal for the progress of the session. I thought we'd be jumping around between multiple stations, but it was not set up for that, and bummer. So anything you can do like that, the better. I started making a point of showing up early to get a head start on patching whatever I thought we were going to start with because of this. I was like, okay, if I can get there early and have it ready to go by the time they get there, victory for me.
Yeah.
And that's something you can probably do with your home studio setup, is you can just have something ready to go by the time whoever's coming shows up.
Oh yeah, totally. Always have that stuff before someone shows up. And I want to say, if you're recording your own band, you need to talk about that also, because that can lead to another problem in your relationship within the band. If one is always the person who has to prepare everything, who does everything, who is responsible for the tech side of things, you might have someone in your band who likes that, but that can also turn into like, I'm the one doing all the things, like I'm responsible for everything, I'm spending so much time on this, so I've seen that like result in a whole other conflict like within the band. So if you need to put in a lot of time to get the headphone lines, the headphone mixes together and make sure everything works and everything's ready when the band arrives, just have a conversation about that. Let them know if like maybe they can help in some way. Maybe somebody else can do something else instead of that. And just so you have the feeling that it's like, that everyone contributes to the whole thing and it's just not one person. So side note there, but I've seen that happen a lot. And I've been there myself as well. So
definitely wise. That's a whole like possible episode, is just the expectations for the work you're putting in. If you're this person recording your own band, you are putting in so much work that like they just can't match. Like you kind of have to be the one doing all of this work. So I think having a conversation about what you expect in return, be that they're practicing and nailing their parts to a very high degree, or maybe they can contribute more in the marketing release stage, something like that.
Yes.
But kind of off topic, I guess.
Totally. Okay. Try to minimize setup times. That's basically what we just said. Do that before the actual session starts. We've already talked about that in a whole episode. Make yourself like checklists, and so that you don't forget stuff. Be prepared. It all comes down to being prepared, to not being surprised by anything, to know how to troubleshoot things. We also have an episode on that. So whenever something goes wrong, you know what to do. Have a plan B. Always assume that something will go wrong, because it will. So be prepared. Try to minimize setup times and technical stuff, and batch if you can. So maybe set up like all the maybe if you're setting up a headphone mix or a headphone line for someone in the band, you might as well do the other three while you're at it, because it's the same task. You can grab the headphones for everyone, do it all at one time. If you're creating new tracks in the DAW, maybe just create all the tracks for the session and like name them and label them, color coding or whatever. Just batch tasks when you're setting up the session or your room. So because it will be faster and you will focus on one thing at a time, which is always huge. It's always important to do.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the last thing we should talk about. So as we've been going here, we've been just like describing these unideal circumstances that will arise if you're not careful, where the player is burnt out or angry or, whatever we've mentioned. Pretty much the situation that we don't want to arrive in. And I think a really valuable skill is knowing when you have arrived there and you just need to stop. You just need to quit for the day, call it, and be like, we have to just try again. Maybe you don't need to quit for the day. Maybe it's just like, okay, let's take a break. Maybe that's all it is. But sometimes it's like, okay, we're just going to call it, that's a day. We're not going to get it today. We have to be okay with that, take some time and come back with a better attitude or rest or get some more different gear, whatever the circumstance calls for. But know when you just have to call it.
Yeah. Yes, totally. And you might wonder what that has to do with the actual title of the episode, like the setup things or knowing when to quit. It all goes into that because you start being hard on yourself and on others if you when you lose the big picture and when you don't know, when you're just too into all the details and you are just obsessing over that kick drum pattern or that kick drum sound or that guitar tone or whatever, and you just don't want to stop until you have it. And you totally missed that moment where you should actually have stopped, and like that results to you will not be a great communicator and a great friend anymore if you're like in that mode, in that zone. Like you kind of all you want to do is get that thing done that you're working on right now, and you're gonna forget everyone else around you. You're gonna forget the big picture. So that's why that is important. And maybe this could be. Maybe someone else in the band can do that job. Maybe you should separate that. We've also had episodes where we talked about that someone should be the producer and like in the creative sense.
Right.
So if you're the engineer and there's always this danger of like over obsessing and focusing and being too hard on everybody. Like if someone next to you can keep the big picture in mind and just say, hey man, I think that's it for today. I don't think this will get better. I think it would be a better idea to continue tomorrow. Then that could be very, very helpful. So if it's not just one person, but you split that up, that could be the solution here.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think anytime you can delegate tasks out, the better.
Yeah.
Generally. It's too much for one man to run a band and record it and produce it, and one man or woman, I should say. It's a huge job. So take the help where you can get it. And it might mean giving up a little bit of control, but that you'll get okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, if that is you, like if you are struggling with that, if it takes too long for you to get your project done, or if you're struggling with people getting angry in your band or whatever, that just know that this is normal. It's not that you are a mean person or that you're doing something wrong or you are not organized enough or any of that. It's just normal. It's because you like it so much, because you love what you do. You want to get it right, and I totally get that. You are obsessing about it because you want to make it perfect, and it's always dangerous to forget your bandmates and the goal and everything while you're doing that. So that's totally normal. I see it over and over again. I've been there myself, so don't feel bad after this episode if you're that person. It's a totally common thing, and it's just a matter of approaching it a little differently, of having someone who like holds you accountable, who helps you with that, who just tells you when you're going too far, who keeps the big picture in mind, trying to be more positive, appreciating the fact that you are not having to pay for studio time, but you have a little more time to take breaks, and always remembering that it's the process that should be fun as well, not just the result. So
yes.
Yeah, don't be mad or angry or sad after this episode. It's totally normal. So Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that you're doing this because you're so passionate about it. That's just like what drives all musicians is like this weird passion for the music we've created. And so, don't be surprised when that passion gets you into these corners and you're like, okay, I have to take a step back.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Totally. And I felt like that's why this episode was important, because we are always talking about, just doing it right, and like paying attention to the details, being prepared and all that. And that can be the result of that, actually. And I don't want that to harm your project or your end result. That's why this episode was so important to me, because I just wanted to let you know that all of that is there to help you, but it should never stop you from having fun or like risking your relationships within the band. It's just there's a line, and so yeah.
Yeah, this is something that like myself, I produce bands all the time. I still struggle with this all the time, even on projects that I'm not like I'm a part of. Like I'm just a producer, so I'm like I wasn't there investing time songwriting with them and being in a band for 5 years, and I'm still getting too obsessed. Like it's just a thing. So it really takes a conscious mind to stay on top of.
All right, totally. So if that is something that interests you, like in general, if you're interested in productivity, getting things done, like focusing on the right things, knowing what is really important and what is not, Malcolm has another podcast called Your Band Sucks at Business, where they talk about business stuff that's like, of course, band-related business stuff, and where they talk about productivity, which is a part of that, and they talk about something that's called the 80-20 principle, which means that 80% of your results come from 20% of the effort you put in, and vice versa. So 80% of the time you spend will only lead to 20% of the results. And you can apply that on basically anything in life. And that, if you get that concept, it will make it a little easier to filter out the things that you don't need to do now, that are not as important. Focus on the few things that are really important and will make the whole thing better. And you will find that you're saving yourself a lot of frustration, a lot of time. And that's just one technique or one principle to know.
Yeah.
But he's got a whole podcast on things like that. And if you want to learn more about that, go to, what's the URL, Malcolm?
It is yourbandsucksatbusiness.com. Easy.
Cool. And what's the episode where it's about the 80-20 principle?
That is episode 14, is the 80-20 principle rule. That one definitely applies can apply to being in the studio. I use stuff like that all the time. And I think it's especially true in a self-recording setup where you don't have all the options available. You don't have the big studio to try out everything that you might think is important. So using principles like the 80-20 rule, you kind of have to figure out what really matters and hone in on that.
And by the way, the 80-20 rule is not something that Malcolm came up with or I came up with, or
no.
But that's the truth. That's not just some thing we think could work, but it's really a universal truth. It just works. It has worked in business for forever. Just look it up, listen to that episode, learn about it. You'll find out what it's all about. But it's just true, and it helps. You can apply that to your personal life as well, but that's a whole nother topic. I nearly 80-20 anything at this point.
Yeah, whenever possible.
Well, yeah.
It's fantastic. We talk about, like, a lot of what we talk about is releasing music, which is obviously the step that comes after you're done learning what Benny's teaching through his self-recording band lessons and stuff like that. So it's kind of a logical next step for listeners of this podcast, I think, to listen to Your Band Sucks at Business and figure out a plan for actually getting that music out there into the world.
Yeah, totally. Highly recommended. Go over, listen to that show, subscribe to that show. It's great. And it will be a great addition to this podcast. And I think every musician should listen to something like that, because it is true that most bands suck at business. So
yeah, aptly named for sure.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So let's wrap it up. I think that's it. Next episode will be on a related topic, and it will be about tracking your progress, because we've mentioned it. Part of not being too hard on yourself and your bandmates is actually keeping track of what you've already achieved, knowing what you still have to do, like keeping the big picture. And there's ways to do that. There are tools that you can use. There's like techniques that you can use. So we're going to talk about how to actually track your progress and how to keep everyone on the same page, how to know at all times what's still left to be done and how long it will take and all that stuff. So yeah, next episode, we're going to be all about that.
Right on.
Okay. See you next week. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.